They applauded him again. I sat 3 seats down from the coffee machine, half listening to the quarterly call while pretending to fix a PowerPoint slide that had been flawless since Tuesday. "Let's give a big round of applause for Ethan," our manager, Mark Caldwell, announced like he was introducing a Nobel laureate instead of the guy whose biggest skill was forwarding emails and saying synergy like it paid his rent. Ethan closed the Helix Logistics deal, exceeded every KPI. "Amazing work, man." The room cheered as if we hadn't all watched him panic for 2 weeks straight asking what an API even was. And me? I built the damn architecture for that rollout. I trained the junior devs. I stayed up until 2 a.m. rewriting the orchestration module after his botched push crashed the staging environment. Ethan once accidentally deployed a test database to production and still walked away with a bonus and a promotion. I got a $10 Starbucks gift card and Mark's usual, "We'll circle back next cycle." Mark was the type who wore sweatshirts with Ivy League logos he'd never earned and called every woman champ. "You're such a rock," he told me after the call, resting one hand on my cubicle wall like he was posing for a brochure. "I know a promotion's overdue, but you get how budget cycles go." I smiled the kind of smile that's armor. Because if you flinch, they'll load more weight on your back and call it trust. That night, I closed my company laptop like a coffin lid and opened the real one. My machine. My rules. I wasn't going to rant on Slack or subtweet my frustration. I was going to build. My GitHub repo blinked awake like a half-loaded weapon. 6 months of quiet labor stared back at me. An AI workflow engine I'd named Sparrow. Modular, fast, invisible. Every line of code written on my own hardware, off the clock, in cafes, or under my kitchen's dim yellow light, while microwaving leftover pad thai. If you've ever clapped through someone else's promotion to keep your job intact, you know that burn. I funneled it into Sparrow. At first, it was a hobby, something to keep my brain alive while the office politics rotted everything else, but soon it became a blueprint for freedom. Each skipped raise turned into a new feature. Every "you're so dependable" became another logic refinement. I'd wake at 5 a.m. to test latency thresholds, then spend weekends running load tests until my fans screamed. I wasn't bitter. I was busy rewriting the playbook they thought I'd die holding. Then came March. A small healthcare tech startup from Boston reached out again. We'd spoken the previous summer. They'd liked my demo but passed, calling it not market ready. Now they wanted a pilot test. My stomach flipped, the suspicious kind of excitement that comes from knowing how easily companies claim what you make. So I dug out my offer letter, printed 7 years earlier in some HR cubicle. Page 3, Clause 8.2. Employee retains full rights to intellectual property developed independently and outside of employer-paid hours. Reading it felt like finding a trapdoor in a locked cell. I highlighted it, slipped it into a red folder that already held my receipts, every denied raise email, every maybe next quarter. Something told me I'd need them. They didn't know I had a side project. They didn't know I was quietly drafting my exit. The trick was to make ambition look like burnout. I started leaving right at 5. No more late-night fixes, no Slack replies at 10:30 p.m. "She must be tired," they whispered. Sure, tired of building castles for other people. Every hour I stopped giving them, I gave to myself. Evenings became sacred. Lavender candlelit, phone flipped, work laptop buried under unpaid bills. Then my real laptop, scuffed and stickered, came alive. Sparrow didn't care about Mark's leadership slogans. Sparrow was built to replace men like him. By December, the prototype breathed. By January, it worked. By February, Sparrow was no longer just a side project. It was a functioning organism. I'd coded its feedback loop so tightly that it could predict project bottlenecks 2 hours before a human manager even noticed. Every test build felt like proof that I didn't need anyone's permission to matter. Then, on a gray Tuesday afternoon, An email pinged my personal inbox. Subject: Pilot Inquiry. The sender's name made my pulse skip. Raymond Flores, CTO, Nova Health Systems. We'd spoken a year earlier when my early prototype barely compiled. I opened the message with shaking hands. Hi, Lily. Not sure if you remember me. We chatted last summer when you were testing your ops engine. We're about to roll out a new backend system and wondered if you'd be open to a small-scale beta. If it performs well, we can discuss licensing. Best, Ray. I reread it 3 times, then sent a clean build and a fresh onboarding doc. 2 hours later, Ray replied, Looks incredible. Starting onboarding this week. Don't tell anyone, but I'm rooting for you. I didn't tell anyone. Not HR, not my closest coworker, not even my sister. Because here's the thing. Once management senses you've built something of your own, they'll find a way to make it theirs. My employment contract was a frayed towel of legal jargon, but one clause still gleamed like armor. Clause 8.2. I'd memorized it. The employee retains full rights to intellectual property developed independently and outside of employer-paid hours. Every time I read it, I felt steadier. I printed that page again, highlighted it in yellow, underlined the last sentence in red, and filed it under Freedom Insurance. That red folder was thick now. Screenshots of Slack messages where Mark took credit for my fixes, emails where HR said, We value your loyalty. We just can't reward it yet, and meeting notes where my name vanished from client decks. I wasn't bitter anymore. I was preparing for war, quietly. The days blurred into code and control. Sparrow learned fast. It adapted, iterated, and simplified workflows that used to take entire teams to coordinate. It didn't just automate tasks, it predicted human failure patterns. Sparrow wasn't my rebellion anymore. It was my emancipation. Then came the next blow. The company landed the massive Blakewell Industries account, worth 7 figures in annual revenue. I led the architecture overhaul, built new integrations from scratch, and trained 2 new engineers. For 3 months, I practically lived inside Jira tickets. When the deal went live, Mark called an all hands. Big win for the operations team, he said. A lot of moving parts, but hey, we delivered. That's leadership. Then he winked at Ethan on the Zoom call like they'd just conquered Everest together. I muted my mic before I said something career-ending, but the real gut punch came 20 minutes later. A DM from HR. Hey Lily, just FYI, we onboarded your new intern, Kyle. Could you help him get started Monday? Also, salary-wise, he's coming in at $65,000 since he's shadowing you. I stared at the message. $65,000. I made $69,000. I'd been there 7 years. Kyle had misspelled database on his resume. I didn't reply. I didn't scream. I just opened Sparrow. 2 hours later, Ray emailed again. Pilot works beautifully. We've got internal approval to greenlight. You're officially our second beta partner. Second, client. I sat motionless in my apartment, surrounded by empty coffee cups and the hum of my old Lenovo. 2 clients, 1 product, no permission asked. I should have felt thrilled. Instead, I felt this dense pressure, like holding a balloon ready to burst, because the moment the company caught wind of this, they'd come for it, claim it, rename it, bury my name beneath a line item. So I made a list, not a dream board, a survival checklist. Backup Sparrow to off-site servers. Scrub metadata from all public demos. Set up third-party timestamp verification. Confirm Clause 8.2 with an employment attorney. Draft a public statement, short, factual, airtight. Then I waited. Because eventually, someone inside Caldwell Analytics would notice that the quiet girl in the corner had stopped carrying everyone else's weight and started carrying her own future instead. When I finally launched the product, it wasn't fireworks. It was one quiet LinkedIn post. Thrilled to officially launch Sparrow. Thank you to everyone who believed early. No hashtags, no company tags, just a whisper into the algorithm. By the time I washed my coffee mug, it had gone viral. By the time I came back from rinsing my mug, my phone was vibrating nonstop. 47 notifications in under 10 minutes. The comments section under my quiet little post had exploded. "Wait, you built this?" one said. "We've been following your beta tests for months." Another read, "Our team just showed this to our ops manager. Can we discuss partnership?" Journalists started DMing me. 3 of them. One from Tech Pulse Weekly, another from a SaaS podcast that had ghosted my cold email last year, and one from a startup newsletter that wrote, "Looks like you've been busy." I barely had time to process before the 6th buzz hit. A message that wasn't from a stranger. "Mark, we need to talk. You should have run this by leadership. Call me. Now." The switch flipped fast, like watching calm water turn black under lightning. I didn't answer. I didn't even open Slack. I just silenced my phone, sat back, and stared at my laptop. It was 2:47 p.m. By 2:52, a new email landed from a VC I'd pitched 8 months ago and never heard from. "Saw your launch. Incredible traction. Can we hop on a quick call today?" I hadn't even published client names yet, hadn't done a demo. But the idea was out there now, gleaming in public like a flare gun shot straight into the sky. Then came the inevitable HR ping. "Hey Lily, can we schedule a quick sync tomorrow morning?" Just a check-in. That's what they called it when the knives came out. Check-ins. I opened my red folder instead. Clause 8.2. Signed and dated, printed fresh. Backups verified. Timestamp logs intact. Every Slack thread where I'd been promised next quarter. Every deck I'd ghostwritten for Mark. Every version of Sparrow's code neatly recorded on my private repositories. This wasn't paranoia. This was preparation. I could already picture their next moves. Legal pulling access logs, IT scanning for unauthorized integrations, HR pretending it was about employee wellness. They'd swarm, they'd twist, they'd try to make my creation theirs. So I moved first. I mirrored my backups, cross-verified my timestamps through a third-party archival service, and added one more clause to my consulting contracts. Client must confirm full legal separation from prior employer. It wasn't aggression, it was survival. That night, the building outside my window blurred into a sea of yellow rectangles. Offices still lit, people still grinding for paychecks that never matched their worth. I wasn't angry anymore, just done being quiet. The next morning, 9:03 a.m., an email hit my inbox. Subject: Conference Room C, 10 a.m. Per CEO request. No context, no agenda, no invite link. It read like a summons. I stared at it for 10 full seconds, then printed clause 8.2 again. Highlighted, dated. I pulled my red folder from the cabinet, dusted off the cover, and added 2 new pages. My latest GitHub logs and the signed beta contracts from Nova Health and Seaboard Systems. This wasn't over-preparation. It was armor. When morning came, I dressed like I was heading to either a funeral or a deposition. Charcoal blazer, no makeup, hair tied back. The hallway outside the conference room smelled faintly of burnt coffee and fear. Inside, the whole cast was already assembled. Mark at the head of the table, jaw tight. 2 board members pretending to scroll their phones, and a man in a sleek gray suit whose posture screamed corporate counsel. Mark smiled that fake smile people wear before a public execution. "Lily," he said, "all honey and venom. Glad you could join us." I nodded once, sat down, unzipped my bag, and placed the red folder squarely on the table. He went straight for the jugular. "We were surprised to see your announcement yesterday," he said, leaning back like a talk show host setting up the punchline. "It's raised concerns internally, mainly around intellectual property and conflicts of interest." I didn't respond. He kept going. You developed this while employed here? That makes it ours. We own your code. The board member on his left chuckled quietly, and Mark turned to the lawyer like, "Tell her." The lawyer opened his folder and began reciting words like fiduciary duty, proprietary overlap, and implied ownership. I let him finish. Then, without a word, I slid my red folder across the table and flipped it open to the highlighted page. Clause 8.2. Signed. Dated. The lawyer stopped mid-sentence. Mark didn't notice. He was still talking. "Look, we're not trying to be punitive, Lily, but you know how this looks." "I do," I said quietly, and the room went still. "I do," I said evenly, my voice flat as glass. "That's why everything I built was coded on my own hardware, after hours, verified by independent timestamp logging." The lawyer blinked, mid-page. Mark frowned, clearly not expecting me to speak at all. "Lily, come on," he said, the coaxing tone of a man used to winning arguments through condescension. "Let's not get defensive. We're just clarifying ownership here." I pointed at the contract. "Clarify this first. You signed it." He glanced down, confused. The lawyer finally leaned forward, reading the page that sat between us like a loaded weapon. His finger traced the sentence I'd underlined in red. "Employee retains full rights to intellectual property developed independently and outside of employer-paid hours." He froze. His jaw flexed once, twice. "What's the issue?" Mark asked, impatient. The lawyer didn't answer. "It says," I continued for him, "that anything created on my own time, without company resources, belongs to me. Every line of Sparrow was written after 6 p.m., on my laptop, through my own networks. I've got third-party verification if you'd like a copy." Silence, the kind that swells until it hums. Mark's face reddened. That's not standard policy anymore. "Maybe not for new hires," I said, sliding the page closer to him. "But it's still in mine. Clause 8.2. Legacy contract. Your HR team never updated it." The older board member, who'd been quietly tapping his pen, finally looked up. The other stopped scrolling his phone. The lawyer flipped through his notes again, faster now, as if a different version of reality might appear on the next page. Mark tried to recover. "Even so, there are moral obligations, fiduciary responsibilities. You are still on payroll, benefiting from company resources. The perception alone could—" I cut him off, calm but sharp. "Perception doesn't override a signed contract. You can't retroactively own my nights, Mark." He blinked. For the first time in 7 years, he didn't have a response ready. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Ms. Chen, may I review your documentation?" I passed him the folder without a word. Inside were my time-stamped commits, off-site server logs, and 2 signed beta agreements, each dated months after regular work hours, each using my private email address. He read the first page, then the second. His brow furrowed deeper with every line. Mark shifted in his chair. "Well? Say something." The lawyer set the papers down, exhaled, and said quietly, "If these records hold up, there's no enforceable claim of ownership. She's within her contractual rights." The air changed. Mark's posture stiffened. The smug tilt of his shoulders collapsed. "That can't be right." "It is," the lawyer replied without looking up. "This clause hasn't been in use since the policy update 3 years ago. She's under the previous version." Mark turned to me, red creeping up his neck. "Did you know this?" "Of course," I said simply. "I read every word before I signed. You should try it sometime." One of the board members stifled a laugh. The other didn't bother hiding his smirk. Mark grabbed the page, scanning it as if sheer disbelief could rewrite it. "This isn't fair," he muttered. "Neither was giving Ethan my bonus," I said. "But here we are." The lawyer sat back, expression neutral but respectful now. Ms. Chin's project falls outside company ownership. At best, we could request acknowledgement of affiliation, but legally, the code is hers. The room went utterly still. Mark looked like a man watching a sandcastle dissolve under the tide. His pen tapped a rapid, helpless rhythm against the table. The board members exchanged glances, the kind that said this meeting just changed everything. I folded my hands on the table. Any other questions? No one answered. Then, from the far end of the table, a quiet voice broke through the silence. It belonged to Charles Grant, the lead investor, someone I'd only ever seen in press photos. He'd been silent the entire time, arms crossed, watching. Now he stood slowly, adjusting his cufflinks. "She's got you cornered," he said, and the entire room froze. Mark's head snapped toward him. "Excuse me?" he said, voice cracking on the second syllable. Charles Grant didn't raise his tone. He didn't need to. His words carried the slow, inevitable weight of gravity. "You heard me. She's got you cornered." He stepped around this table, eyes flicking briefly to the page still lying in front of Mark, the one with his own signature at the bottom. "I've been sitting in this meeting to see how this leadership team handles pressure," Charles said evenly. "So far, I'm not impressed." Mark tried to recover. "Charles, with all due respect." Charles raised a hand. "No, you don't get to use that line. You called in legal, dragged an employee into a room like a criminal, and expected her to fold. She followed the contract you approved. She did the work. You buried her under busy work and budget excuses, and now that she built something valuable, you think you own it?" Mark's jaw worked soundlessly, the way it does when someone realizes the oxygen's left the room. The lawyer said nothing. The board members suddenly became very still, no longer pretending to check emails. Charles turned toward me next. "Lily," he said, his voice softening for the first time. "You've done exceptional work. For years. I should have noticed earlier." I met his eyes, careful, steady. Noticed isn't the same as respected. That earned me the faintest flicker of a smile from him. Small, but real. "You're right," he said. Then he looked back at Mark. "We're done." 3 words. Simple, surgical. Mark blinked. "Done what?" "You're finished," Charles said, pushing his chair back. "You had 7 years of her time. You don't get 1 more minute." He nodded once toward me, a quiet, professional acknowledgement, and turned for the door. "Charles, wait." Mark started, but Charles was already walking out. The 2 board members followed like a current pulling away from shore, neither saying a word. Now it was just the 3 of us. Mark, the lawyer, and me. The fluorescent light above us buzzed faintly, the kind of sterile hum that always seemed to fill the silence after humiliation. Mark stood there gripping the edge of the table, still staring at the page as though it might rewrite itself if he glared hard enough. "You tricked me," he muttered finally, low and hoarse. I stood, calm. "No, Mark. I read what you signed. There's a difference." He didn't look up. His hand was trembling slightly. The lawyer closed his briefcase and spoke quietly. "I suggest we adjourn." Mark didn't respond. I gathered my things, folder, laptop, pen, and zipped my bag. I didn't rush. I wanted him to feel every second of silence. I turned to the door, paused, and looked back once. "You know the saddest part?" I said softly. "You could have had a piece of it years ago. All you had to do was treat me like I mattered." He still didn't answer. When I stepped into the hallway, the air felt different, cleaner somehow, lighter. I passed a row of framed posters. Integrity, teamwork, innovation. Words that looked like jokes now. My phone buzzed as I reached the elevator. A message from Carla, my old team lead. He's melting down. Just told HR you tricked him. They're scrambling. I typed one sentence back. Tell them I won't sue if they don't drag it. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Consider it delivered, she replied. God, I wish I could have filmed his face. I smiled, a small, real one this time. They still didn't understand. I hadn't tricked anyone. They wrote the rules. I just finally played by them. The elevator doors opened. As they slid shut, I caught one last glimpse through the glass wall. Mark still hunched over the table, color drained, surrounded by empty chairs. For the first time in 7 years, I felt weightless, free. The elevator hummed softly as it descended, the numbers blinking down in slow motion. 9, 8, 7. Each floor felt like shedding another layer of exhaustion I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. When the doors slid open at the lobby, sunlight hit me square in the face. Bright, golden, and clean. Like something had finally snapped back into alignment. I stepped out onto the marble floor and past the company plaque that had once felt like a monument. Caldwell Analytics, innovating the future. I almost laughed. The only innovation that ever happened there had come from people like me. The ones too tired to quit and too smart to stay quiet forever. My phone buzzed again before I even reached the glass doors. VC3. Subject: Quick chat. Saw your launch. Would love to discuss a seed round. A seed round. They weren't offering coffee chats or advisory explorations. They were ready to invest. I didn't even have to pitch this time. The market had already spoken for me. I paused in the revolving door, thumb hovering over my phone screen, and smiled. Not yet, I thought. I wasn't ready to talk money before taking a breath of freedom. The fall air outside was crisp and sharp, the kind that makes the city feel alive. The block smelled faintly of roasted espresso and concrete dust. I started walking with no destination, just away. Away from the building where I'd once stayed past midnight fixing someone else's mess. Away from the conference room where Mark had tried to own what he didn't build. Away from the version of myself who thought gratitude was a form of protection. My phone buzzed again. Carla, my old teammate. They're already doing damage control. HR says it was a miscommunication. PR's drafting a statement. Let them, I typed back. I'm not their story anymore. As I hit send, I passed the corner cafe where I used to write Sparrow's earliest lines of code. Same chipped tables, same barista who always misspelled my name as Lily with 2 L's. For a second, I could almost see my past self sitting there again, hoodie on, earbuds in, half-empty latte beside a terminal window full of bugs. That version of me had been so scared, terrified of getting fired, of failing, of not being seen. She'd built Sparrow in secret like it was contraband. I wanted to tell her it worked out, that the long nights mattered, that reading every line of fine print wasn't paranoia, it was power. When I reached the corner, another email pinged through, this one from Vector Capital, a firm I'd assumed had forgotten I existed after a cold pitch months ago. Lily, we saw your product announcement. Buzz is strong. Let's talk. Soon. Below it was a 1-page attachment, a term sheet. Not an invitation. Not a promise to circle back. A legitimate, pre-signed term sheet with valuation placeholders already filled. They were serious. I stopped walking, right there on the sidewalk. The city noise around me, horns, footsteps, the hiss of a bus pulling up, faded into the background. My entire life for the past 7 years had been measured in deliverables, sprint reviews, and empty praise. Now, for the first time, I was the deliverable, the deal, the value. I exhaled slowly, pocketed my phone, and kept walking. I passed the tiny park across from our building where I'd once eaten lunch alone during promotion week, the week Ethan had been recognized for leadership. I'd cried behind my sunglasses then, ashamed of caring so much. Now, I just felt distance, like watching an old movie you barely recognize yourself in. When I reached the end of the block, another message flashed on my screen. Ray, Nova Health. Just saw the news. Congrats, Lily. The team's thrilled. You've earned this. That one hit different. It wasn't business. It was validation. I stopped under a red maple tree and looked up through the branches, light cutting through like stained glass. For years, I'd thought revenge meant exposing people, making them pay. But standing there, free, I realized it wasn't about destruction. It was about subtraction. I didn't need to burn it down. I just had to stop holding it up. And so, I kept walking. No backward glances, no dramatic exits, just the sound of my own heels on the sidewalk, steady and certain.